Of course, as always, in these highly accelerated times, there is a lot to report on and there is a lot to discuss, but I just have to start by picking out one statement by a Trump administration cabinet member this week as kind of highlighting everything that's going on in the new Gilded Age. The statement comes from Steve Mnuchin, President Trump's a very gilded Secretary of the Treasury, former Goldman Sachs, former president of a foreclosure bank, that is to say a home mortgage institution that routinely foreclosed on people, sometimes illegally, sometimes fraudulently, once foreclosing on an elderly widow for a 30-something cents discrepancy in one of her payments, a genuinely old-fashioned bad guy of the worst 19th century variety in 21st century clothing. That is, of course, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Now, the Steve Mnuchin quote I want to share with you is this. When being asked about the new Trump tax plan, and by the way, that tax plan gives enormous giveaways to the wealthy and neglects to do so, by and large, for the middle class. There are some exceptions, but that tax plan actually makes it harder for some people in the middle class and increases taxes for them. That said, this tax plan that is such a giveaway to the wealthy, it's such a giveaway to corporations. Here's what the Treasury Secretary, no, wait, I'm going to pull a Rachel Maddow on you. I'm not going to tell you yet. Wait, I'm going to give you a little more background. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was interviewed, I think this was, February of this year, and he uttered something that came to be known as the Mnuchin rule. He said, quote unquote, there would be no absolute tax cut for the upper class, end quote. He said that on CNBC. Senator Ron Wyden labeled it the Mnuchin rule, and that was the pledge from the Treasury Secretary. No absolute tax cut for the upper class, except that they just proposed one. So when asked about that this week, here was his answer. The question was, of course, are you repealing or reversing yourself on the so-called Mnuchin rule? Steve Mnuchin's answer, quote, it's very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy. Again, it's very hard, he says, not to give tax cuts to the wealthy. Now, his logic was shaky. He said that the top 20% of the people pay 95% of the taxes. The top 10% of the people pay 81% of the taxes. Now, even if that were true, and by the way, he's ignoring non-federal taxes, he's ignoring payroll tax, which everyone who is working pays, so he's misrepresenting the numbers. But even if you believe that, he goes on from that to say, so when you're cutting taxes across the board, it's very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy along with tax cuts to the middle class. Gee, it actually, if you think about it, is exactly the other way around. It is very easy to give tax cuts, if you so choose, to the middle class and not give them to the wealthy. Why? Because if the wealthy pay a preponderance of federal income tax, then there is much less revenue lost if you cut middle taxes only for, cut federal taxes only for the middle class and down. Now, we could get into all sorts of arcane discussions about what constitutes revenue, and we could talk about taxation esoterically, but let's stick with what the Secretary of the Treasury said. He said it's very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy. You know what? I think it's very easy. The way to not give tax cuts to the wealthy is just don't do it.